Three words for you. Demons kill youngsters. That's a brilliantly simple premise behind both Evil Dead movies. Based on Sam Raimi's infamous amongst horror fans template setting short Within the Woods, the first film sees a group of young adults venturing to a cabin in the woods and unleashing a force that attacks and possesses them one at a time. The second movie continues the storyline. Despite what many people like to say, it is not a remake. Legal wranglings forced the filmmakers to shoot an abridged recap for the uninitiated before pushing the demonic madness further and further. Of course, if the movies were only about demons killing people, they would have still been pretty enjoyable for similar-minded fans like myself, but probably not half as successful. No, these movies are also about writer-director Raimi and his dedicated troupe. From his formative years spent making 8mm movies in his backyard with friends, many of whom would still be working with him 20 years later, it's no surprise that these movies are infused with adolescent glee and energy, walking a fine line between clear-eyed narrative vision and cramming as many crazy ideas as possible into every scene. Raimi knew, certainly on the first movie anyway, that a horror flick was his best shot at finding an audience. He succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Non-alcoholic beverage. Quickly get dry mouth when you're reading. Like many 30-something UK residents, I actually saw the second Evil Dead movie before the first. This was all thanks to the BBFC who, and I can only hazard a guess here, seemed to think that any viewers seeing a woman raped by a tree would be so mentally disturbed that the British populace would form a lynch mob to clear the surrounding areas of particularly virile-looking flora. So, if you don't mind, I will, in a rather unorthodox manner, start with some comments on the second movie, which is still just the best of the lot in my opinion. The main characters are slightly older here, but none the wiser, and just as susceptible to demonic bullying. The primary difference this time around is that Bruce Campbell is, let's face it, majorly macho. He's ripped, he's buff, whatever you want to call it, and he's ready to kick ass. His anti-hero Ash is one of the finest and most enduring human characters in modern horror. This is in no small way thanks to the brilliant hamminess and knowingness of Campbell's performance. And it's no surprise that Raimi has consistently rewarded his good friend over the years whenever possible. The second film takes all of the madness and horror of the first movie, amplifies it, and then adds humour. Furthermore, unlike the often laboured comic stylings of Raimi's third installment, Army of Darkness, it does so with great success. Anyone can see this, unless you happen to have been me at 12 years old. Yeah, I have to admit that my first encounter with Mr. Raimi's creative output left me, as I'm sure he would be happy to hear, a whimpering, traumatised mess who had taken everything at face value and found no solace at all in the humour I would eventually be able to see. Now, of course, I can barely get through a minute of the thing without laughing out loud. From the reimagined recap of the first film, through every blood-soaked moment and right up to the final punchline, we have a perfect mix of gore, scares and belly laughs. Although still very bloody, there was less trouble with the censors upon Evil Dead 2's release, as Raimi used every trick in the book, whether it was using green blood instead of red, something that can help you sneak past archaic censorship rulings, or simply pushing the envelope to embrace the absurdity of it all. Necessity is indeed the mother of invention. Any horror fan will tell you that a good horror comedy is one of the hardest things to get right, but Raimi easily earns himself a place alongside the likes of John Landis, Dan O'Bannon, Mel Brooks, and Edgar Wright. Shaun of the Dead may still be quite recent, although it's got to be about 20 years old now, is it? But it's a modern comedy horror classic. No discussion. The sparse script provides a surprisingly high amount of quotable material while the visual gags go flying by, sometimes literally every few minutes. It doesn't matter that everything is still a little bit rough around the edges. It's unimportant that we can see the top of the set during an impressive display of Raimicam, or that we can see the wire holding a flying eyeball, or even the rip in the back of Henrietta's suit. It's the unbridled enthusiasm that matters. For viewers, the fun to be had is not only in the mayhem happening on screen, but also snickering at just how far Raimi pushes his leading man, Bruce Campbell, he of the mighty chin and master of reverse motion acting. It really is a balls-out white-knuckle ride that audiences should enjoy on the first encounter and then truly savour on repeat viewings. Here, the tone of the comedic violence is pitched perfectly, unlike other occasions when Raimi appears to want to do nothing more than recreate Three Stooges moments. I'm looking at Army of Darkness and Crime Wave when I say that. Great moments abound, and people already well acquainted with the film will instantly smile whenever someone says groovy or workshed in their best Bruce Campbell voice, which I am not attempting to do right now. The chainsaw has its finest moments on screen since Leatherface met his McCulloch, and a dismembered hand hasn't been this much fun since Thing from the Addams Family. Throw in the "but baby, I ain't holding your hand" moment, and one of my personal favourites of all time, the image of Campbell trapped in a fruit cellar while he hears a tape recording above him revealing that a man has killed and buried his possessed wife in that fruit cellar. You should already be smiling in recognition or rushing to see the film right now. To dismiss this fine sequel as either too dumb or for gorehounds only is to dismiss, arguably, the most important film in this A-list director's canon. Sound as if I am overrating the film? Maybe, but not by much. The first film undeniably launched Sam Raimi's career, but Evil Dead 2, more importantly for the suits, showed that Raimi knew his target audience and that he could make his wacky sensibilities a bit more palatable for the masses. This ability to adapt and harness his talents has doubtlessly helped Raimi to go from horror bad boy to superhero king without losing his loyal fanbase. His style is stamped all over efforts as diverse as The Quick and the Dead, Darkman, A Simple Plan, For Love of the Game, The Gift, and of course the Spider-Man films. And I'm sure other horror fans were as pleased as I was to see Doc Ock's tentacles in Spider-Man 2 being given the Raimi Cam treatment. Now, a bit belatedly perhaps, let's rewind. As mentioned a while ago, the first film was a simplistic affair, albeit one shot over a 4-year period, content to give us a bunch of characters and then putting them through the ringer as they succumb to the evil forces battering down their paltry defences. The cast is enjoyably fresh-faced, yet not completely beautiful and glamorous. That would detract from the main event. From the inauspicious start of a fly buzzing around, the same sound that would be used at the end of Army of Darkness to end the trilogy, it really doesn't take long for the Evil Dead to start racking up the atmosphere and ballsy, bloody entertainment. It only takes the first playing of a tape featuring a translation of the Necronomicon and audiences start seeing Raimi's hyperactive talent shine through. The impressive sound design, especially considering the budget, complements the dazzling, appropriately crazy camera work, especially the demonic POV shot that drags us hurtling through the woods. Like some other things I could mention, we never forget our first time. My first encounter with this fine, dare I say, seminal horror actually happened on Christmas Day. At the age of 16, I had finally managed to unearth an uncut VHS copy of the movie, but living in foster care as I was at the time, no violins please, I'm just setting the scene, I wasn't allowed to watch an 18 certificate film, even though it was mine, except on Christmas Day. As a special treat, because my foster parents were basically fed up with me whining about me not being able to watch my own property, they relented. Of course, by this time I had seen the second movie repeatedly and enjoyed the comedic slant, so there was some apprehension in my mind when I finally settled down to watch this infamous alleged classic. How bad could the first film be? How powerful could it remain after so long in the metaphorical wilderness, while the likes of Freddy, Jason and Pinhead had already taken their deserved spaces in my deep dark fears? I was soon to find out that some movies could remain very powerful. At the end of this wild onslaught, I felt as if I had been grabbed by the scruff of the neck and dragged alongside our hapless hero through the demonic travail centering on that rather unimportant cabin in the woods. Despite the fact that it couldn't gloss over its budgetary limitations, despite the many moments during the first half when the actors clearly showed how amateurish they were, I love them, but there are no Oscar winners there, not even the mighty Bruce Campbell. And despite its claymation finale, The Evil Dead still managed to thrill, shock and disturb me. It was an all too rare case, especially in the post-video nasty era, where a hyped up horror movie actually delivered the goods. Alongside the possessions in the movie, Raimi's humour was already seeping into the celluloid. Sometimes it takes the form of a subtle in-joke, the ripped poster of The Hills Have Eyes, which started a series of fun jabs between Raimi and Craven, or the voice on the tape being that of American Movie Classics host Bob Dorian. Other times it can be a skewed childish giggle in the middle of a particularly horrific moment, emphasising the playfulness of the demonic entity and the hopelessness for the protagonists. The movie also works so well for fans because it realises all of our dreams, one of us making good, a quality product on a tiny budget, and hell, even a poster quote from Stephen King when the guy was still in his prime. Incorporating the corruption of innocence, the violation of the body, paranoia, helplessness, and more, The Evil Dead checks off all of those boxes and then goes even further than many of us could have envisaged. More evident in Evil Dead 2 than in any other installments, there isn't any clear good and evil, as characters are prone to be controlled like puppets. Nobody has any real control over their destiny, and many of the characters manage to last as long as they do by simply weathering the storm until the evil grows weary of toying with them. Like most great movies of the genre, nobody is indispensable. The Evil Dead is a film full of familiarity, while the second movie is content to drag us into the realm of the sublimely ridiculous. Who hasn't played a game with friends where they tried to guess the next playing card? Who hasn't heard those childish taunts when we were all younger? Who hasn't been stuck in a cabin in the woods, attacked by demons and raped by trees? Okay, maybe not quite that last bit, but the movie certainly plays on those easy fears of isolation, ineffectuality, and more. The sequel seems to carefully avoid any familiarity, with the exception of the inherent primal fears. We're treated instead to limbs being chainsawed off, a hero who becomes cockier by the minute instead of more afraid, and a series of situations that grow increasingly perilous and amusing at the same time. Another thing that fans of the genre will surely appreciate, as I do, is Raimi's love for the old Harryhausen style of animation and effects. From the finale of The Evil Dead through the Dance of the Dead towards the beginning of the sequel, Raimi creates many wonderful little touches completed in this older style. Everything culminates in the wonderful, affectionate display taking up much of Army of Darkness, allowing us all to enjoy a modern take on those classic skeleton armies that used to impress and entertain us so much. The trilogy, particularly the first two movies, remains essential viewing for any true horror fan. Kandarian demons have never been so much fun. That is that. I did say I would try and do some more structured videos, so I did feel that reading about the Evil Dead movies from Aaron Christensen's presented Horror 101 book would be a good way to do that, especially as, coincidentally, the Evil Dead movies were written about by me, Kevin Matthews. Yeah, it would be, I think, over 20 years ago now, and there are ways in which that is written that, you know, I might have done differently. It's not perfect, but I think it's quite a good celebration of the films and why we like them, and I hope that some people have made it through all of that dialogue and enjoyed it, despite me tripping over my own tongue sometimes. It's the season for horror movies, and something like Horror 101 is sort of written as a primer, and a lot of conversations can be a primer. So that's something to bear in mind. Don't be a gatekeeper during October. Don't be a snob. Don't be the person who puts someone off the horror genre when you could help them start a journey of discovery that fans a flame that turns into a love of the horror genre. That's the thing to bear in mind. There's a difference between someone who claims that they've seen everything and then you find out they haven't seen some of the big hitters, and someone who just hasn't seen every film ever made, which is all of us, because there are only so many hours in the day and every film is at some point a new film to people. That's why in the podcast itself, I think we sometimes speak maybe a bit too vaguely when we're trying to discuss where films have gone, unless we've given a full spoiler warning, because we want to discuss the films. We don't want to tell people exactly what has happened in the films. Sometimes, you know, most of the time, I think we want people to discover the films if we've pointed them in that direction. That's absolutely great. So yeah, it's time of year to bear that in mind as well. There are probably lots of people who've heard of The Evil Dead and not actually watched it because they're just like, oh, it's one of those titles I've always heard. I've not got round to it. Excuse me. Ash versus Evil Dead is also great fun. A lot of people like the Evil Dead remake / reboot. It's got stuff that's good in it. Again, if someone's gone to that film first, don't just dismiss their opinion entirely. Just, you know, let them maybe have enjoyed that and work backwards and check out the Evil Dead and the rest of Raimi's work. That can be a good thing. So enjoy yourselves, enjoy all the horror that you may be watching this month, and enjoy, hopefully, reminding people of the classics and the titles that you may assume everyone has seen, but you might be pleasantly surprised if you can point someone in the right direction and they find a new old film that they end up loving. I'm not sure if I'll be as structured next time. Probably not, let's face it. But feedback on this would be appreciated. I know it's a different kind of video. I hope it's a good kind of video for this time of year and the fact that we covered The Evil Dead on the podcast. That's me. Until next time.